So, hello and welcome back to my channel where we're going to discuss the other concepts of Charvak's philosophy. Today, we're going to start with the concept of liberation. So, for most of the Indian philosophy, accept liberation as the highest goal of human life. But Charvak disagrees with it as the concept of liberation depends upon an internal soul. As we've seen in an earlier video, that Charvak's metaphysics is trying to defend Charvak's perception and has rejected all the other transcendental entities on the ground that they can't be perceived. So he rejects eternal soul, he rejects God as well. On similar lines, he says that liberation cannot be accepted as the higher goal and totally rejects the concept of liberation based on the concept of an eternal soul. However, most of the Indian philosophies are of the opinion that for human life, liberation, which can be called as a complete cessation of suffering and the stoppage of all the worldly life cycle of karma, the cycle of birth and rebirth, this is what they call as liberation, and that is the ultimate purpose of human life. But Charvak totally denies it. Liberation is conceived as a complete cessation of suffering and a stoppage of the cycle of birth and rebirth. So, this is in lines of the general norm that there has been a lot of suffering in this empirical world, and for people, they just want to end this suffering for all the things which they're facing, and this has been accounted as a reason for their previous accumulation of bad karma by other philosophical systems and by different religions and sects. But however, Charvak says that liberation cannot be said to be the ultimate goal or the highest goal of human life. For Charvak, in this world, suffering can only be minimized up to a certain extent. It cannot be fully removed. So you cannot just you cannot have a complete cessation of suffering. You can just minimize it to a certain extent. You can just repress it to a certain extent, and it cannot be fully removed. There might be some suffering in your life, and you have to deal with it. This is what Charvak is saying. Uh, like contrary to the religious and sectarian beliefs, its complete cessation is possible only after death. So, according to Charvak, only when you are dead, only when every ounce of life is gone from you, that's when there's complete cessation of suffering. But death can't be accepted as the ultimate aim of life. So, what Charvak accepts is that calm is the ultimate aim of life, and earth is the means to achieve it. What he means by this statement is that pleasure, which is called calm, is the ultimate aim. Like you have to work for pleasure, you have to gain pleasure at every cost, you have to be in a pleasurous mode all the time. And in order to achieve this very situation or this mode, you have to attain earth, which can be denoted as the monetary value or the monetary resources in order to achieve the pleasures you want. Charvak's metaphysical thought lead to a crude form of egoistic hedonism. So hedonism is basically that pleasure is the highest goal of life, it is the ultimate goal of life, and uh, it is the thing which will take you far in life. For Charvaks, as we have read earlier, eat, drink, and marry. This was his ethics, and you have to be in a happy, not a very connotation of happy, but uh, in a pleasurous mode all the time. And to achieve it, you have to attain earth, and he terms hedonism as the ultimate and the highest goal and the supreme end of life. This can also be reflected as his hedonistic ethics. So, we have termed his ethics as egoistic hedonism. It is based on the philosophical claim that human beings always act in such a way as to maximize their own happiness. So this is partially true, and we can say it's true to a larger extent because the human behavior and the human mind is wired in such a way that people try to maximize their own happiness, and they can go to a larger extent in order to gain happiness, in order to gain the pleasures which they need, and for that they would abandon every other thing, even though it might be the bad thing, but for that they would do everything in order to achieve that hedonistic approach of life, in order to achieve those pleasures and aims which they actually want, and neglecting the other factors which are there, and that would lead them to different paths. And this will basically be detrimental as a practical approach, but for Charvaks, this is the only thing which is perceivable, right? So the material pleasures are the things which you can achieve in this empirical world according to Charvaks, and that should be your ultimate goal of life. That should be your goal, to achieve all the materialistic pleasures you can, and that is what living is for Charvaks. So eat, drink, marry, and sometimes Netflix and chill. That is what Charvak's hedonism means in modern times. However, there are many criticisms for Charvak's rejection of transcendental entities. You might have also felt some inconsistencies in Charvak's theory when he rejects transcendental entities like God and soul on the basis that they cannot be perceived. He says that there cannot be some internal uh, independent soul, and soul is always a conscious, and the consciousness is always a byproduct of matter in his theory of Bhu Chaitanyavad. And he also says that the body is identical with matter in his theory of Deh Atmavad. However, the critic says that Charvak holds that consciousness is a byproduct of matter, but we never perceive anywhere consciousness coming out of material things. So material things are like the basically in modern science we could say the abiotic objects. For example, a shoe, a plate. You cannot see consciousness emerging out of it. You just see them as still uh, objects, though although you can perceive them, but it is not something which is basically alive or basically have uh, an essence of consciousness within them. So, what the critics say is that we can never perceive anywhere consciousness coming out of material things. Moreover, Charvak cannot rely upon inference to prove the origin of the consciousness from matter, since he does not treat it as a praman. So, Charvak has been very clear with his acceptance of only perception as the praman, or the true source of valid knowledge. However, if we try to reason, or if we try to infer that consciousness is coming out of material things, this will be contrary to what Charvak has taught us in his epistemology. So we cannot infer that consciousness is coming out of material things. For this, Charvak had to give some examples as to how he wants us to believe that Charvak's consciousness comes out of matter. This has been a major inconsistency in his theory, and for him to counter it, he would have to give substantial evidence on an example based on perception, as how does the consciousness come out of matter. Charvak rejects transcendental entities like soul on grounds that they cannot be perceived, as we've read earlier. But through perception, Charvak cannot claim conclusively that they do not exist as well. So this is basically trying to counter Charvak on his own worldly language. So they're just trying to counter Charvak on the basis of the words he has used. So if he says that uh, I'm just rejecting soul on the grounds that I cannot perceive it, but the critics say that Charvak can also, in similar lines, cannot say that uh, they do not exist as well, because he does not perceive them as not existing as well. When he rejects their existence outrightly, he makes use of deductive logic inference, which violates his own epistemology. So, in all of the criticisms, we can see that Charvak's epistemology has been challenged, as are many inconsistencies within it, and there have been many instances where we could see that there is a use of certain kind of deductive knowledge and inference, which was outrightly opposed by Charvak as pratyakshmev ekam pramanam. So we could see from this example is that something can be accepted as real only if it can be perceived. This is the first statement. So transcendental entities cannot be perceived, so therefore they are not real. This is what we are using the deductive knowledge. We are using the deductive logic to try to come to a conclusion that the transcendental entities do not exist, that they are not real. So what? Uh, this is why this is contrary to Charvak's epistemology. Consciousness is naturally and radically different from material elements. The Bhagavad Gita says that existence bhav cannot come from non-existence abhav. So Bhagavad Gita is a prominent literary text, and according to it, the bhav, which connotes the existence, cannot come from something which is non-existent, from the abhav. So the examples of betel and alcohol explain the origin of material qualities from material elements. It fails to prove the origin of consciousness from material elements. So when Charva gave us examples about the betel, areca nut, lime, and the mixing of it, he was trying to just prove his point on the basis of material elements, and what we have seen in the mixture of that, in the mixture of these things in a certain composition, is that only a material element was formed. There was no clue or there was no evidence of the emergence of consciousness from these material elements. So what he had failed to prove is that the origin of consciousness from material elements. He could not substantiate it with an argument. If consciousness is a property of matter, then all other material properties should also be known by all and shouldn't be private. But in reality, it isn't. This is a very true statement because there are different levels of awareness and there are different levels of consciousness which we can see in our daily human life. So not everybody is as conscious as the other, and there are different levels of consciousness within the same person as well. So you are like when you just wake up, you are not in that much of conscious level, and then in the due course of day you get more conscious and you get more productive in your works, and at the end of the day when you are sleeping there's no sign of consciousness you could which is evident or which is perceivable. So there are different stages of consciousness as well, and if you're trying to denote consciousness as a byproduct of matter, as in Bhu Chaitanyavad, so the consciousness should be same at all times and should be same for everybody. It should not be a very private thing. It should be in all the matter and not just limited to certain parts of matter, or not just limited to certain material elements. So the critic says that all other material properties, just like all other material properties, the consciousness should be known by all and should not be private. If Charvak is like rejecting the transcendental entities of soul, then this should have been the case. If consciousness is an attribute of living body, then it should be inseparable from it. In epilepsy and dreamless sleep, living body is seen without consciousness. So, as I said earlier, that in different stages of a human body, in different stage, like the different stages which go on, which we go on a day-to-day basis, the dreamless sleep is one of them. And in dreamless sleep, we have no hint of consciousness as such. Where is consciousness at that time of time? At that point of time, when consciousness is already a part of matter, and he has also said in De Atmavad that the body is identical with soul. So, if my body is identical with soul, and my body is already present in the dreamless sleep, but where is my soul? And there's no hint of soul. There's no clue of it. Where did it go? So, if body and soul are like uh, they cannot be differentiated, so it has to be inseparable. But this is not the case. So they say that if consciousness is an attribute of the living body, then it should be inseparable from it. In epilepsy and dreamless sleep, living body is seen without consciousness. The explanation of facts like memory, recognition, and synthetic unity of consciousness become impossible. Thus, an eternal soul different from material body has to be accepted. So, considering the claims of Charvak, if we just consider it, let's just take that whatever Charvak say is true. It is paramount, and this is the only reality. So, if that is the case, there is no point of memory because your perception will change at every instant. There will be many instances where whatever you have perceived is going to change. So, there's no memory, there's no recognition. You cannot recognize something because Uh, for example, a candle, it is melting. Like you just lit a candle, and as the wax melts, the height gets shortened. So, for one instance, you see a fully lit up candle, and for after a few minutes, you see that the candle is gone, and you can just only see the wick and the melted wax all over it. So, if there is no memory, how would you know that there was a candle burning and you lit it up? There was a candle, you lit it up, and it was burning, and because of the lighting up of the candle and the consuming of all the wax and the melting of it, there is now just a wick left. How would you know that if there is no eternal memory, or there is no eternal soul which has the capability of memory, recognition, and the synthetic unity of consciousness, like the synthetic unity of all the things which we have experienced so far. There's no there is no valid logic or reason to justify that, right? Also, why does body need consciousness to know itself? As we have read in the Atmavad that body is identical to soul, then why do we need a body? Then why do we need consciousness to know about the body? Why does body need consciousness to know about itself? When Charvak says consciousness is bodily matter. So we have had read certain criticisms, and they are as evident and as basic as the philosophy. So moving on, we'll go about reading the rejection of Aksa. Aksa is one of the five elements, fundamental elements considered by the other philosophical systems. However, Charvak has only considered four, which are earth, air, water, and fire. He has rejected the fundamental nature of Aksa and says that, and unlike the Nyaya Vaisheshika, which accept Aksa as an eternal, all pervading substance, which is substratum of the quality of sound, Charvak rejects Aksa on the ground that they cannot be perceived. Just in lines with his epistemology, Charvak says that you cannot perceive Aksa, you cannot perceive sound, so it's non existent. Similar to modern science, Charvak can say that sound does not exist, does not need an unperceivable medium for being propagated. Also, Charvak says sound is the product of four fundamental elements, and it is propagated through mutual interaction between them. So, according to Charvak, Aksha, which is termed as a substratum of the quality of sound by the other philosophical systems like Nyaya and Vaisheshika, it is not the case in Charvak's philosophy, because Charvak says that it is just a composition of the four fundamental elements of earth, fire, air, and water, and a mutual interaction between them which produces the sound. It is in lines with the idea of modern science, where it is said that the sound is just the compression and rarefaction through solid, liquid, and gas medium, and this is because of these medium that the propagation of sound is possible. So, similar to modern science, Charva can also say that sound does not need any unperceivable medium for them to be propagated. So, sound does not need any unperceivable thing. It is just a combination of the four fundamental elements and a mutual interaction between them. Charvak's view on Aksa can be contested in similar ways, as we have refuted Charvak's rejection of transcendental entities. So, we've come to an end of Charvak's philosophy, and with this, we have to evaluate as to why Charvak's philosophy is a very prominent and important one. So, Charvak saved Indian philosophy from falling into the pits of dogmatism. It is very true, because at that time there were many instances where different rituals and certain customs actually perpetuated and penetrated deep into the Indian society, and people were all over it. And there were also some instances where people were mindlessly following all those rituals and not trying to reason as to why are they so important. So Charvak basically saved Indian philosophy from falling into the pits of dogmatism. Skepticism or agnosticism is the expression of a free mind that refuses to accept traditional wisdom without thorough criticism. So skepticism and agnosticism are the thoughts or are the expressions of a free mind, whereby you don't accept something as that which is offered to you. You just try to reason it. You try to have a thorough criticism of it before accepting it. And in Western philosophy, as well as similarly on similar lines, in Western philosophy, Hume adopted a kind of skepticism towards prevalent views in epistemology and metaphysics. So Hume's contribution to the philosophy actually arose Immanuel Kant from his dogmatic slumber, which paved for his critical philosophy. Also, Charvak's view on origin of world and life well fits into modern science, which explains them through Big Bang and evolution theories, which are materialistic in sense. However, in modern science, you can say that we use inference and deductive knowledge and also the verbal testimony, which is totally on contrary with Charvak's epistemology. But the results which we see in in modern science are typically similar to what Charvak has tried to explain. Like, those are in similar materialistic terms, materialistic sense, and this is what Charvak makes it happen. So, the theory of materialism and the materialistic essence of life is what Charvak propagates. And earlier, and again, I would like to reiterate that Charvak's epistemology is pratyakshmev ekam pramanam. So, the perception is the only valid source of knowledge for Charvak, and on similar lines, he is giving various theories and his metaphysics. His metaphysics is basically based upon the empirical world or the world which we see or perceive through our sense organs only, and everything beyond that, everything which is unperceivable, is what he rejects. He rejects the soul, he rejects the God, and he even rejects the concept of liberation. For him, the hedonistic way of life, the hedonistic way in which he achieves pleasure through the attainment of earth, is the ultimate goal of life, and there is no cessation of suffering in this world. This suffering ends only when you die, but this death cannot be considered as the ultimate aim of life. So he considers the aim or the true purpose of life is to attain all the materialistic pleasures which are there in this world. He also rejects the aksha, which is called the substratum of the quality of sound, on the lines that there are only four fundamental elements in this world which combine in different proportions to form different elements. These four elements are earth, air, water, and fire, and the production of sound and the propagation of it cannot be perceived, and so unperceivable medium cannot be termed as for the propagation of sound. Thereby, sound is produced because of the composition of the four fundamental elements and the mutual interaction between them. Hence, we've come to an end to this very philosophy propagated and propounded by Charvak. I'll see you guys in the next video where we try to study about different Indian philosophical systems. Till then, see ya. Bye.